Good morning, everybody. I'm thinking about the main themes we're kind of covering this week, and we're going to start off with just a quick hit list of those things. We're going to begin in the tropics. Now, the early morning update from the National Hurricane Center has this potential tropical disturbance at a 90% chance of developing. In fact, let me refresh this to see if they update. There we go. We got the 6:34 a.m. update. 90% chance of this thing continuing to develop. And I was just watching the latest model runs, and they really come into a stronger conclusion on where this eventually will move. And as it develops down here in parts of the Western Caribbean, there just seems to be better guidance of it coming toward the Yucatan or toward Cuba, the side of Cuba, or through the Yucatan Strait and coming toward Florida. What is still not known is the strength of this system, given the wind shear potential that's ahead of it. And if it's high, it's going to knock it out. If it is low and perfectly timed with, a system that can guide it in this direction, well, we have to watch that as well. And we're going to look at that in just a few minutes with the AI model. The next part of this, just to show you something here, is the chances of this developing are relatively high. And if you just look over the next 10 days, by a week from now, we'll know if it makes it through the Yucatan Strait. But over a 90% chance, again, of developing is also in the model. So it's not just the National Hurricane Center that's given it that kind of lead. Other than that, we do have quite a bit of moisture moving across sections of the United States that have been quite wet, but the holes that have been missed, like the Canadian Prairie, parts of the northern plains, the southwest, the northeast, continue to show up very dry in this forecast. But notice throughout parts of the Mid-South and the Ohio Valley, then again down here in parts of the southern plains to the eastern side of the southern plains, we see wetter conditions. And remember, all of this is starting with troughs of low pressure that are diving into the northwest. So this is going to be a setup for, I think, some pretty good snows throughout the western United States in the mountain chains that are more toward the north, so the Cascades, the Northern Rockies, versus where we saw it last week, which was down here in the Southern Rockies and out in the high plains here of Colorado. So this is kind of just a quick hit on where this precipitation pattern's heading, and just to let you know, some of this is now from the next possible tropical cyclone that's coming out here. The WPC is picking up that about a week from now. I did like these graphics put out yesterday by the Climate Prediction Center. They're starting to hone in on the risk of that system we talked about on like the 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd. The one that's coming out, we'll see it again here in a few moments. They've got a pretty large area in the central United States under the risk of strong winds. They've even included a big area here of Kansas and Nebraska, parts of South Dakota, under a moderate risk, the 20th through the 22nd of very, very strong winds. They continue to, as I am, monitor where the chance for snow is on this thing. The most difficult snow forecast of the year is always the first one. And models are almost always too aggressive on the early chances of snow. There's a lot of things that have to be overcome in order for us to break into a pattern where we can get that white stuff on the ground. But just want to let you know that their latest update, again, the 20th, 21st, 22nd, is now parts of Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And just to let you know, some of the models are here, some of them are back here, some of them are over in the upper Midwest. We're going to take a look at the probabilities in a second. But we do know that there is a pretty significant temperature change coming behind this. We've been kind of covering that, but I think we're getting a more robust signal now of what those temperatures might be. So we'll look at that in a few minutes. But that time frame immediately following that low, we're looking at some pretty cold temperatures getting down into parts of our cotton belt, down here in this part of Texas as well. Okay, so those temperatures, take a look. That's day 5 through 10. This will, get us that idea when that storm system's coming through. And again, we're looking at an ensemble average, and I'm just looking for the kind of epicenters of cold. And what's interesting about this is that we're also kind of setting an expiration date on the very warm conditions that are over the east, because by day 10 through 15, of course, this leading up to Thanksgiving, not only do we need to be talking about the chances of colder weather getting into the southeast and into the northeast, but there's going to be a discussion about some snow in this area as well, if this next deep trough has the look that some of the forecast models are giving it. So here we go. This is just something to think about here. This is where we were. This is how the temperature ranks shaped up for September and October. We had the Southwest and the Northern Plains, nearly setting records, some of them setting records on the warmest 2-month stretch. Again, September and October, on record, going back to 1893. And this was, again, we remember this pattern, right? It's pretty clear. There was just a large ridge that the flow was going like this. This is what settled in the excessive drought in this area, most of this area as well. That has all changed, and it's really easy to see on the temperature maps how it changed. This is now what November looks like. And just remember that the simplest thing to do is the jet stream's got to go south of the cold air and north of the warm. So instead of having flow that comes around like this, we've now got jet stream flow that's coming into the west. It's really entering in the northwest. We've watched a lot of systems curl up over the Four Corner states, and we need to know if that might be a typical winter pattern. Are we going to get a lot of Colorado lows, or will there be what we call panhandle hookers, or will there be, Arklatex lows? Will there be the Miller A, which run up here, or the Miller Bs, or will we get systems that can really just come off the Rockies anywhere all winter long? But one thing that will be changing is how hot it's been to start the month down here in the southeast. I mean, everywhere that you see the number 1 is the new warmest start to a November on our record. And again, they go back to 1893 here with these climate reporting districts. Okay, so that's kind of where we need to take this and try to understand what's going to change next. And right now, this morning, we are watching some active storms rolling through the middle part of the United States. Just some, early morning lightning and thunder for parts of Kansas and Oklahoma. And again, this was an area that 2 weeks ago we were talking about just in the throes of excessive drought. And now we've had multiple storm systems roll through this area to add quite a bit of precipitation. And it's kind of funny. I don't know about any of you listening, but when I was a kid, the Back to the Future movies were they were amazing. And I've probably watched them hundreds of times. Just a reminder, yesterday, November 12th, was the day of the lightning strike, the big one, in some fictitious town called Hill Valley in California. So just, a little bit of movie trivia there. But as this system rolls through, I want to show you what the forecast models are doing with the total rainfall. So let's watch the high-res NAM. We're going to spread some rain throughout the Mississippi Valley into the Ohio Valley. We've also got some here coming into the central and western Corn Belt. And what I'm watching for is how much of this gets into the Ohio Valley, how much of it moves into the mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast just by the end of this week. And while that's taking shape, our next system is already entering the Northwest. We're going to look at the snowfall here in just a few moments. But why I'm so keen on this is I want to know what it's going to take to bust through this epic drought that the Northeast has been dealing with. And this next system, while it gets into Virginia and parts of North Carolina, I don't see it fully breaking into big pockets of the Northeast. You do notice that, again, those other dry areas we've been discussing continue, at least over the next few days, to stay dry, while systems really enter the Pacific Northwest and hit the mountains in almost a perpendicular fashion. And again, just to put a point to this, the last 14 days, right, the Northwest has been doing better on precipitation. We've had extremely wet conditions here in the central and southern plains moving into the Midwest, but we have this area that has just continued on its longer stretch of very, very dry conditions that we just are going to see some of this fill in with this next system rolling through, but the Northeast, I think, is going to be the last holdout. I want to be very careful with this map. Even though you see up here some high precipitation percentages, fall getting into early winter is a very dry time period. So, you can have 5 times your normal precipitation in this area and still not recover those soil moisture losses we've been dealing with in these areas. I did get asked an interesting question about frozen soil. Several of you commented on that yesterday. What I'm talking about here is you can still freeze up the soil without having a ton of water in it. And why that's so important is if we do get really cold soil temperatures in place, then if it does snow, what happens is the snow just sits on top of that frozen, top 2 inches or so. And as a result, you don't get any penetration of that water into the ground. And that's what I'm concerned about, is if we lock in the dryness, we cannot put water into that frozen soil, even though it doesn't have a lot of water content in it. There is still water in it, some very, very little amount in it. But just an important point here to think through as we go into winter. Okay, from there, let's go and look at some probabilities. Over the next 7 days, this is our chance of getting an inch out of this setup. And again, we're kind of watching the tropical system somewhere in here. We don't yet know exactly where that's going to be coming through, but you got an idea. So a lot of this Mid-South Ohio Valley through Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Mississippi, Alabama, the next system that's coming through is going to start to fill in the Central Plains. See that? If I just take you out to 10 days, we now see higher probabilities here. The Northwest, of course, as we talked about yesterday, is taking the brunt of each of these systems. And so we have to just remember that in November, really now until April, their precipitation amounts are just, we can't compare to the rest of the country because of how wet it can be in this area. But they're going to get 6 or 7 months of that kind of flow, which can drive really, really high precipitation totals. Let's go ahead and step it up to 2 inches real quick. And we'll even go high on the 4-inch side just to show you the potential of the tropical system and what the coastal parts of Washington and Oregon could see. I want to show you the dry areas once again. We still have the northeast, which is going to be one of our last holdouts, the southeast as well, but this could all depend on where the tropical system goes. The farther you go in toward Mexico and to the Four Corner states and down into Southern California, it's the same story I've been giving you. We're waiting on systems to curl up down here rather than make it into the mountains and curl up, or subtropical jet stream flow from this direction. The other part of this that's, where these storm systems are developing, which is way down here, is that we're not getting that moisture into Montana or into, Alberta or parts of, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. That shows up drier as well. All right, so here is the pattern. Let's refresh this real quick and just watch these systems come through. So by Thursday into Friday, I'm keeping an eye on this deep low here, because as it comes in, there it is, Friday into Saturday. Remember, we have two things. We have the lead wave, and then the kicker wave on the backside that's going to shove this guy out. I don't even know if that's an official meteorology term, but it just looks like a foot kicking this thing. And it goes way out ahead, and then it's got this deeper trough that's on the backside. And any time this winter that you hear me talk about that with a wave that follows a lead wave, you end up getting a system that has a lot of wrap to it. In other words, these tend to curl up really nicely, and they tend to slow down a little bit. And that's why, again, from Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we're going to watch this, deep system move across the country. Now, you notice one other piece to this. There is the artificial intelligence trying to do something with that tropical system taking it over the Yucatan. What will be interesting is, does it get to this point? It's not here in the 500 millibar heights, but does it get to this point by next Tuesday and the bottom of this wave shove it off to the east? That's going to be the question we're going to try to answer. But I do know this, as we get out there beyond that, we establish a pretty deep low that's going to go over the northeast. That's one I'm going to have to talk to you about, with maybe the chance for some snow, but certainly the chances for rain and cold air getting in. When are we? We're next Thursday. And then we do notice that the pattern is trying to get a bit blocky in its nature. There's high pressure extending over low pressure to the south. And that's going to give us a ridge in the west that's probably going to have some longer duration to it, which means we're going to see a drier signal in week 2 across the west. But this will be pouring in cold air on the backside of this low, and certainly a pretty robust signal in the models. We've been talking about that guy all week, so I'm just wanting you to stay with me on the consistency of it. Again, Thursday, November 21st. So let's go and have a look at the European model on the timing of some of this. All right, there's system number 1 through Thursday. This is the one that tries to push into the mid-Atlantic while the next deep low comes into the west. And I'll show you the snow for this in a moment. What we notice is that low might curl up over North Carolina and spin up some stronger winds. So if you're listening to North Carolina, be ready for that. It's Thursday night into Friday morning. All right, next system. Remember, the kicker wave comes out. There it is. This is Sunday. This is the one that was down here. It comes out, the broader trough on the backside. Now, this one doesn't really make a lot of precip in this area. There could be some, but the reason for this is that we're not making a direct pull on the Gulf. Some of this flow is coming out of, Mexico, Texas, New Mexico, and it's not got, loaded with moisture. It's a system that follows it right there, okay? That's the one we're going to keep an eye on. And as it comes out, when is this? This would be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Why does this one have a better chance? The high is here, so there's much stronger pull on the moisture. There's a deeper low. I was messing around with this. I went ahead and tried to do 2 millibar increments on the pressure lines because I was really looking for the real tight circulations. I don't know if I'm going to leave it that way or not, but you can see they're spaced pretty tightly here. And this is a deep low that's going to have, I think, a severe weather threat to its south and the potential for snow on the northern side. Now, at the time that gets out to about next Wednesday, the position of this front will tell us what's going to happen with the tropical system, which here in the European model has made it through the Yucatan Strait. That front should be something that could increase the shear and maybe push this system off. But what I'll be watching for, see it moving over toward Florida there? What I want to know is how much snow we're getting on the backside of this. And then by next Thursday, we've got this pattern all stacked up. So what that means is there's a deep trough of low pressure here. There's a big ridge of high pressure there. So the flow is going around and over, and it's kind of curling up into this system. That's going to slow the progression down quite a bit. Now, I mentioned snow. Let's go and have a look at some of the snow maps. This is the next 5 days. So we already see the Northern Rockies here, the Cascades, even part of the Sierra Nevada picking up on some decent snow. This is the GFS during that time frame. Notice that there is this chance for getting some snow here in the next 5 days by Sunday night. So we got to watch that. But then the European model, if I take you out, let's just go on out here to, I don't know, next Thursday night. Again, we are not going to be looking at this and assuming that the totals are right. We're looking for placement. That's the European solution. And if I stretch this out, this is the GFS solution. And again, what's it doing? It's much farther into the, into the upper Midwest. Let me just show you. We do have a new run-in from the GFS. It moved it even farther. And we just need to be really careful with this. In fact, what I think we should do is just go back to the ensemble and let's look up some probabilities on, we'll do 3 inches. And yeah, when you see this much of a area with lower probability spread out, this is where the models are just not certain on where the chances for snow are going to be in this area. And I can't pin it down. There's no way. If I made a guess at it, it would just be that. I'd be picking and choosing which model I liked and kind of giving you a solution for it. So what I just want to be aware of, and that's why we started the video with this, is that next system next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we will watch its eventual kind of pocket of cold air and where the snow could potentially be in that situation. All right. From here, let's get out there into week 2. Now this is Thursday, so that's the low we've been talking about. And here again, there's the high coming over the top of the low. There's the big ridge that's in the west. And that's why when you look out there, we see drier in the northwest, which the models were consistent with. Now, I just want to point out the AI model, which is the one I just showed you a moment ago, that's the one that wants to drag this system watch into the northwest. See it right there? So that's why you're getting this extra kick in the precipitation pattern out there in week 2 that the ensembles are trying to leave a bit more offshore. So we'll watch that one as well. And certainly the CPC is seeing a later arrival of that system too. But again, I got to see if we can get this system into the northeast, which we are seeing better chances for above average precip. And we just need to know what that could mean in terms of maybe having some snow on the backside. If I showed you any of the snow maps, it's all conjecture at this point. But do you see this? That's kind of what we're talking about. It's way out there, in the forecast, but it's something that I just think we're gonna have to assess and try to figure out what's what. All right, so let's talk temperatures. Here's our frost risk over the next 7 days, and you can already begin to see the cold air that's coming in on the backside of that low, getting down here to Texas, New Mexico. El Paso may be approaching a frosty temperature. And if we look at the highs, let's get a quick refresh on this. This is today's highs compared to average to tomorrow. Really cold as we get some cold air backing up against the Appalachian Mountains here. But a warm up in the midsection of the country for Friday into Saturday. And here's how things shape up early next week. Look at the cold air that's coming in with this system on the 18th, 19th, and then on the 20th is where we're going to drop this really cold air into this area, setting up that system. All right, just to review, because we looked at it earlier, this is the 5-day temperature anomaly. This is a sliding window, and this would be day 5 through 10, and getting out there day 10 through 15. Now, what is interesting about this pattern is that even with all of that cold air coming through, I can't tell you that it's fully linked to cold air in Canada, right? We don't see that. We see mild conditions compared to average here. So this is still a setup like we talked about on Monday, where unlike 1975, where there was just brutally cold air coming from the Arctic all the way down here, this is not fully set up that way. So it brings in brief interludes of cold air, and they're going to propagate across the country, but it's not the setup where we just get cold, stay cold for weeks on end as we go through the rest of fall, right? I think we're going to see a much more volatile temperature pattern than one that gets fully established and stuck. Now, I'm still quite disappointed in any sort of confidence in the subseasonal forecast. I'm going to show you the European model again. This would be through Christmas, so the 25th of November to the 25th of December. And the model just keeps bouncing back and forth. I mean, yesterday it was wet here. It was drier here, and now it's made a little bit of a change. I don't think we're going to be able to establish a good understanding of the late November through December pattern yet because of these reasons. So just being transparent, I have to spend more time thinking this through. The first is that the MJO has come over here to phase 1 and 2, but it's very weakly in phase 1, 2. If the MJO would have swept way out here, in other words, these squiggly lines were way over here, then I would just be calling for nonstop kind of crazy weather systems across the country, like MJO Phase 2, deep lows off the coast. They come in, they make the turn. There's some ridging over the southeast. This would be the setup for Canada. This would be the setup for the northern plains getting early season blizzards. I mean, it would really get going. And if we stayed in Phase 1, then the whole country is going to be in for active systems. Again, but we would need a strong La Nina to make this happen. And we don't have that. But we'd get systems rolling in here. Perfect placement of the ridge over the Baja for cranking systems through the country. Getting high pressure to build in the North Atlantic would actually set up, these low pressure systems that roll up the, up the coast. I mean, that right there, boy, if we dialed that up at any point this winter, we would have just, it'd be an active go. But as I made the point yesterday, this La Nina just is not, it's not there. The PDO signal is only strong because of how warm this is. So for me, the key thing to watch is the extent and the depth of this cold water here. I think that's going to be important to determine how close these troughs get to the northwest. Do they get into the California, and how active does the pattern set up for southwest flow across the United States? That southwest flow is what's key. Anything that changes the jet stream to stop coming out of the southwest more often puts us back over into a pattern that is dry. And we know that we're working against longer term drought issues already. So from here, I want to just take you quickly to another thing we're keeping an eye on, and that would be the polar vortex. It's strong. It's displaced over toward, over here toward Russia right now. And that is also kind of co-located with that really deep trough. Remember we talked about that the last couple of days that's over parts of Europe and Russia. So I just want to let you know that it's about the time of year that we need to watch for any sort of displacement or weakness in this, and I don't see any in the near term. So when I mentioned earlier that I don't have a strong connection with really deep cold air coming across, North America, this is part of that discussion, although it is still very early in the season to be trying to link the polar vortex with weather systems, okay? But we'll just watch it together. Just talking with my colleague Eric Hunt from University of Nebraska-Lincoln, he mentioned the other day in a video he did about snowfall, and it is important to know that in October we did build up quite a bit of snowpack compared to average over parts of Russia and parts of Mongolia, while we were not so much in excess across a lot of Canada here. And it is important to know that when we do build up really deep reservoirs of cold air here early in the season, we can set up a situation very easily where we get large ridges that push here, and that forces what we call cross-polar flow. I haven't talked about cross-polar flow since that week in January last year when the Chiefs played the Dolphins at minus 30 degrees. Remember that? That's the last time we saw it. But it's important just to know that we need to keep an eye on this because Northern Hemisphere snow extent in October and its placement is sometimes a good indicator on how the polar vortex may behave, as Eric was discussing, and also just an indicator on where our reservoirs of cold air are going to be. So I just want you to know that I'll be keeping an eye on that. Last thing for today is a quick update on South America. Really, the next 7, in fact, let's just stretch this out to 10 days here real quick. That's the 10-day forecast for rainfall, and this is about as monsoon of a signal as you can get. When you compare that to averages, it continues to be very wet here, still dry in parts of Paraguay. I do want to point out, though, that the signal here in the latest model run went much drier as well. So I'm going to draw it for you again, but this corridor wet with dryness on either side, that may be a pattern that gets established. And what this means is that the center-west region, actually most of Brazil, is looking at very favorable rainfall. It would be northeast Brazil and Argentina that we would have a discussion about drought going forward. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. We got a lot of things to watch, and we'll just pick it up again tomorrow morning and see where things move around. So you all have a good one, and we'll chat then. Thanks.